It's the Kyle Hyman Show on Redeemer Radio.
This is Kyle Hyman. Joining us today is Avera Maria, here to talk to us about Pride Month and what that means for Catholics. Thanks for being here, Avera Maria.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm humbled.
For those that aren't familiar, I feel like even if you would try to avoid it, I've been getting emails from different companies celebrating Pride Month. What would that mean for somebody that hasn't heard of Pride Month?
So Pride Month is basically a celebration of the LGBTQ plus community. It is actually celebrated in June to commemorate the Stonewall riots, which happened in the 1960s, the late 1960s, which I believe is the first really pro-LGBTQ movement that we've ever known in the United States. So it's celebrated in June to commemorate that, and it's basically a celebration of LGBTQ identities, of LGBTQ people. And as Catholics, we're kind of left in this really weird spot saying, like, what does all of this mean? You know, and I think it can be, honestly, very confusing for a lot of people within the community itself because it can mean so many different things to so many different people.
Yeah.
So it leaves us in a really weird spot. And I think we're all just kind of looking for truth. But that can kind of be a little bit hard to be found, even after we've been celebrating Pride Month for so long.
Yeah, so where do you find yourself? I know you've talked about and blogged about homosexuality within the Catholic Church and its teachings. How do you find yourself in this whole mix?
I find myself an outsider by choice and not so much by choice. I've been told by a lot of people that identify with the LGBTQ community, you know, you're not welcome here. We don't want you in this community. And we think you're a bigot and a homophobe. And of course, none of that is true. But at the same time, you know, I really don't identify with myself with the whole Pride Month agenda at all, because I look to Christ to kind of find my identity. You know, I look to God to find my identity. You know, I see myself as a woman. I see myself as a beloved daughter of God, taken into his holy family by our Savior, Jesus Christ. And that's where I find my identity, not necessarily in something that I just so happen to experience.
How would you explain your experience?
So, to people who maybe don't have any sort of religious background and they ask me about my sexuality, I'll usually say bisexual just to keep the conversation surface level.
Okay.
So I'm attracted to both men and women, but predominantly attracted to women, yes.
And for those within the faith, how do you describe that then?
I describe myself as a woman and a daughter of God.
Okay.
Keep it very simple.
So you talked about some of the challenges that we have. For a lot of people, I mean, to celebrate people, humanity, regardless, it doesn't matter who they're attracted to, I can definitely celebrate them as human beings. What is the challenge that comes with Pride Month?
Because this is an issue where people within the LGBT community define their root of their identities in their sexualities, it becomes difficult to have a conversation about the celebration of the human person, because I hesitate to say that they think of themselves as anything other than gay or bisexual or transgender. You know, they may see themselves by their occupations or say, like, I'm a teacher or I do this or do that. But at the heart of what they see their identity is their sexuality. It's who they're attracted to, or it's who they wish to have a romantic relationship with, or just not wanting to have a romantic relationship at all in some cases. So it becomes hard to have these conversations with people because we as Christians know that our identities are male and female. You know, that goes back to Genesis, where we see the story of creation and we see man and woman, and we see God say, in our image and likeness, we're going to create them. You know, they're male and female. But now we've come to be introduced in our society all these other different quote-unquote identities, which are rooted in sexual attraction or lack thereof. So it's really, really difficult to have these conversations. But I think in the place of the church, we need to be able to open ourselves up to hear people's stories and respond in compassion, but also be like Christ and the woman caught in adultery and not end with compassion, but end in conversion, saying like, let's try and find truth together and see what it means to be a human being, and if that's where our true identity lies.
And have you always been on board with church teaching on this topic, or is it something that you've struggled with in the past?
I've struggled with it. I don't always want to say that I was gung-ho about it, which is, it's actually really interesting. I believed what the Catholic Church taught, but I was mad that I believed it. I was upset that I had so much faith in God and that I knew God was real and that I knew God had a place in my life. And I was honestly very upset about it, because I wanted to do what I wanted to do. I wanted to love whoever I wanted to love, and I wanted to do it in the way that I wanted to do it. But at the end of the day, I'd always hear God in the very depths of my soul saying, "You want me." Like, at the end of the day, I am who you want because I designed you for that. I created you for that. So I finally came to a place where I was just like, I can't do this on my own. I can't deny everything that I know to be true, everything that I realize to be true. So as soon as I made the conscious decision to not only know what the Catholic Church taught, but live in accordance with that teaching, my entire life changed, and I became so much happier and so much at peace with who I was. And it made everything so much simpler and easier for me. And it brought joy into my life that I didn't realize was possible when I was trying to identify myself within the LGBTQ community.
Why do you think that's a disconnect between kind of this reality that living out the church's teaching on this topic can be a positive thing when it seems on the surface to be so full of negatives, and it's always associated with oppression or not understanding, not loving, not accepting, not being willing to see the other side of the story?
Mm-hmm. You really have to see it for what it is, because I think when you get to the root of everything that the church teaches, it's rooted in love. It's rooted in that need for relationship with the Creator. I was reading through the Catechism the other day, and I think it's paragraph 2331, where it says, God created us with the vocation and therefore the capacity and responsibility to love and be in communion with others. So there is an inherent desire in every human person to love. So the LGBT community has it right when they say love is love. However, they don't know the depth of what they're saying. They don't know the heart of what that truly means. So we have to be aware that there is truth outside of what we feel. And I think that that's what tripped me up for a long time, is because I was feeling these very powerful emotions and I was relying on those emotions for truth. But feelings can fade. Feelings can change, and we can feel all of these different things and they may not be rooted in truth. So you have to kind of put your inhibitions aside and really search for truth, which I think is what every person wants to do, but not every person can stomach what the truth actually is. We kind of have to put ourselves aside, in a sense, and try and figure out what it means to be a person, what it means for us to be even walking this earth. We have to be willing to search for the truth if we're going to attain happiness in this life.
Yeah, we're talking with Avera Maria. This is a month where many people would celebrate as Pride Month. And I was kind of wondering if this month gives us an opportunity to open a dialogue or a conversation. I think a lot of times it can become heated or a debate or even kind of angry at each other. Is this a good time to approach that? Or is there an opportunity for us to reach out and to have a conversation and a dialogue? Or is it better to kind of wait for this month to settle down and have that outside of this month, do you think?
In the way you approach it, I think that this is the perfect time to open a dialogue. First and foremost, though, I think this is an important time for us in the church to listen first, because I think at the end of the day, we know the truth. We know what is good, true, and beautiful, but people outside of the church may not. So we know that we have the truth. We know that we have the armor of God. We know what's real and what's good, but people outside of that don't. So I think that when we listen to people's stories and we're truly engaged and, are really willing to hear what they have to say, this is the way that we're going to know how to gift them with the truth. This is definitely not a time to be silent, I don't think, but this is a time to enter into a conversation and make sure that we're being compassionate, but it is never compassionate to withhold the truth from someone. And I think that that's where we need to make sure that we're being extra cautious, that we're not being overly compassionate, but that, we're able to share the truth, whether people are able to stomach it or not. There is a way to go about that, but, we shouldn't be overly harsh and we shouldn't be overly compassionate either. So there's a way to have this dialogue. It just might take a little bit of time and effort for that dialogue to really get underway.
I understand the not being overly harsh. What do you mean by not being overly compassionate?
So one of the things that I've encountered in my journey in the faith is that some people, even clergy, actually seem to think that I need the faith watered down for me in order for me to enter into the church fully, or even for me to have a good view of the church. This isn't a compassionate thing to do, because when I come into the church, I want to come into the church for what it is, not for what someone kind of put in front of me just to get my foot in the door. I don't want people to tell me, you can be romantic towards a partner, you don't necessarily have to be celibate the whole time, and I've had that occasion. I've been in confession one time where a priest told me, I don't believe it's a bad thing to act on your attractions. The church might, but I don't. And he's saying this to me in confession, and I came out so dumbfounded. I think my faith is so strong and nobody was going to shake my faith, but that doesn't mean that the next person that comes into the confessional with him is going to be the same way.
Right.
So I think it's very, very important to be honest and to tell me the truth. The last thing that I want to suffer through is being lied to. I think that that's the biggest mistake that a lot of people make in regards to dealing with this conversation. The truth is hard to hear, but the truth is ultimately going to set me and my brothers and sisters free. So don't lie to us. Don't water down the faith, but tell me the truth. Tell me how it is. And even if that's hard for me to hear, it's what I need to hear.
Any suggestions on books, videos, websites for people to check out that are looking for ways to explain this to other people, or if somebody has same-sex attraction, resources for them for understanding the truth of the church's teaching?
The best book that I have ever read on the topic of homosexuality, and actually one of my favorite books overall, is a book called Why I Don't Call Myself Gay by Daniel C. Mattson.
Sure.
He gives a little bit of his life story, as well as explaining the teachings of the church on homosexuality. It's a phenomenal book. I also recommend the documentary Desire of the Everlasting Hills, and as well as The Third Way, which is on YouTube, I know. And, of course, my blog, too, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely.
So you can check that out as well.
Tell us your blog, and you're also available for speaking and things like that as well?
I am. So my blog is imhohblog.com. So it stands for Inside My Holy of Holies. So you can find me there. Also, if you would like to have me come out and speak at your event, you can email Nick, N-I-C, at yourcatholicmedia.com. Nick at
yourcatholicmedia.com. And your blog again is imhohblog.com. Thank you so much, Avera Maria, for joining us today and sharing this with us.
Thank you so much for having me.